Oh, it started. Hey, hey, students of Seneca, it's Jono here. Thanks everyone for joining this live stream for GCSE AQA English Lit. I hope you are feeling excited, well, as excited as you can for the exam. Probably more excited for it to be over with. I'm excited to get this one done. What are we going to be covering today? We're going to go first. I'm going to start off just by going over some general stuff about the exam, like what the sections are, what the timings are, all that kind of stuff, and give you some tips and tricks on how to structure your answers to make sure you can get the most marks. There'll be a few tips on how to, if you're stretching for like an 8 or 9, I'll give a few tips. And then afterwards, we're going over some predicted questions for the poem, the anthology questions. There are so many books for AQA English that I thought it would be impossible to try and cover the different books. But check out the learning modules for that for some last minute prep. So we'll go over, you guys were great on voting on Insta. We're going to go over My Last Duchess. And then we're going to go over The Farmer's Bride, because they had the most votes on the Insta poll. So thanks everyone for voting on those. So let's crack on. Shout out any questions you've got in the comments. I'll keep a lookout. And I know we're going over some predicted papers, but someone had a really good comment. You can never predict what's going to come up. So it's good to just learn as many poems as you can. And let's get going. I have got the gong with me, which if you've joined these before, it's what we do when someone gets a question right. But I think it does distract a little bit, so I'll try not to do it too much. But we're just going to start off with a little... Wow, it's so loud and it's in such a tiny room that echoes. Okay, so let's start off with going over what the exam looks like. So obviously, you know, this is your paper 2 for English Lit, and it's going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes long, which is going to be, yes, thank you for the shout out to the gong. It's going to be a long, it's a long exam, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and you've got 3 questions from 3 sections, okay? So you want to spend about 45 minutes on each question. And so we're going over the AQA paper 2 for those of you who are wondering, but the tips and tricks will be useful for any English Lit exam. And the first section, section A, that's going to be on the text you've studied, okay? So the book you've been studying for the past 2 years, that is what the question is going to be on. So you have a choice of 2 questions, only pick one. You only need to answer 1 question in section A. And this is a good example of how you could structure the essay. So you want to introduce by explaining how the theme or character is developed through the novel. The question is going to be about a key theme or character. So have a nice topic sentence to introduce it. Then you're going to want to write a minimum of 3 paragraphs. Okay, so you're going to want to use embedded quotation and examples from the beginning, middle, and end of the novel. So whatever novel you're doing, when you're writing your essay, try and pick examples from the beginning, middle, and end. And if you're doing 3 paragraphs, it's easy. First paragraph is something from the beginning, second is from the middle, and third is from the end, okay? Yes, we'll be going over some tips for the unseen poem. Don't worry, that's coming up a little bit later. And shout out to Liz for gongiendo. Thank you for checking out the Spanish live stream. Okay, paragraph structure is really important. So some of you might have learned petal, which is where you make a point, evidence, you talk about the technique, you analyze the effect, and then you link it to the play's theme or context, okay? You can also use peel, which is where you have point, you give some evidence, you then explain the evidence, and you link it. So that's a really good way to start. If you're pushing for higher marks, okay, you're gonna wanna be using something like a peel. So I'm not just making funny noises, don't worry, we're not there. Basically, you're gonna wanna give more than 1 piece of evidence for your point. So you want to give point, evidence, explain, then give another piece of evidence, explain that piece of evidence, and then link it back, okay? So it's better to make 3 points about 1 piece of evidence than give 3 pieces of evidence. You really want to analyze and get analytical. That's how you're going to get those top marks, okay? So if you're going for those high marks, give your point, evidence, explain that, give another piece of evidence, explain it, then explain it again. Get as much as you can from that 1 quote, okay? So that's how you should structure it. So you want 3 paragraphs minimum for your first for your first essay, okay? Then we move on to the anthology section, and that's going to be one question from the cluster you have studied, okay? So make sure you know which cluster you studied. Always good. My friend Miranda didn't know which cluster she was studying, but she bossed the exam because she knew how to structure her essays. So when you get the question, spend 10 minutes annotating the poem and planning your response, okay? And you want to write a short introduction. Make sure you have a topic sentence and use the writer's names. And straight from the get-go, make sure you compare their similarities and differences, okay? And I'd say for this, you want to write at least two pedal or two peel paragraphs, okay? Use words from the questions, use quotations, name the techniques. That you get marks for naming the techniques, like alliteration, enjambment, like caesura, whatever technique you want to talk about. Make sure you name those techniques and link those poems together. We're going to go over specifically some anthology, like predictive questions a bit later. So I'll talk more about how those later. Okay. And welcome everyone that's joining now. Thank you for coming to this live stream. Let me know if you've got any questions. Hey, tomorrow. And now we're going to move on to section C. Now this can cause students like a lot of anxiety. It is the unseen poem, okay? So you're already at section C. You've done really well. You've got through 90 minutes of English literature examination. But what are you going to do with the poem you haven't seen? Now, I think it always helps when you're in the exam to have a little bit of structure. So when you've got something new, at least you've got something you can fall back on. So when you get the unseen poem, you're going to want to analyze it and annotate it. And there's a really handy acronym for this called WRITER. Okay, so when you're annotating the poem, you're going to use the acronym WRITER. Now, what does that stand for? The W is what? Who, when, what? So that's what's happening in the poem, like who's talking, what's the response, like what's going on. Then it's rhyme, rhythm, and structure. That is the R. So is there any rhyming pattern? Are there some couplets? Like, is there an internal rhyme? Like, what's going on? What is the rhythm? Is it monosyllabic? Do all the words have one syllable? Is it very like, I don't know, is it like very staccato? Is it very harsh? What's the rhythm? Is there any alliteration? Is it very plosive? That's what you want to be thinking of, and using those words like monosyllabic, plosive, alliteration. That's what's going to help. Okay, then we move on to the I, that is imagery. Okay, so what is the imagery? The imagery is are there any similes? Are there any metaphors? What words are used to create those images? If you're pushing for higher grades, you can use words like allegory. That's if there's an extended metaphor, so the one that runs the whole way through the poem. That can be a good thing to talk about. That's what you want to be trying to look for imagery. Is there any like anthropomorphization? So when, I think I said that wrong, Google it, but it's like when an inanimate object is given human characteristics. That can be very powerful imagery. Then we're going on to the T in WRITER, that's the tone. So what feelings are being involved? Do they change in the poem? Is there any transition in tone, any change? Effect, what effect does the poem have on you? And our response, what response have you had, okay? So that's a really good way, when you get that unseen poem, use the WRITER acronym to help you annotate it. What does that stand for again? W is the what, who, when, where, all of that. R is the rhyme, rhythm, and the structure. I know there's an S in there, but you know, no acronym is perfect. I is the imagery, so imagery is all about metaphors and similes. T is the tone, so how do you feel? How do you feel? E is the effect, and R is the response. So what response have you had? What response did the poem had to achieve? What was his aims or her aims? Has the response changed over time? Boom. Okay, so that's what you get. And you get section C has two questions, right? Question one is just about that first poem. So you're gonna wanna answer, that's why you wanna annotate it really well, okay? And then question two, you've got to compare the two poems. But it's 8 marks, so I'd suggest spending about 10 minutes on it. Read the question carefully, read the poem twice slowly. I would read, but after you annotate the first poem, just quickly read the second one, because it can give you more time to think about what you're gonna write. And then once you've read the second poem, you want to aim to write at least one paragraph on the comparative question. using words like whereas or similarly. That's a really hard word to say. Similarly. And that's what you want to do. Key thing to remember, in this question, you need to comment on poetic techniques and their effects, because there's only marks available for commenting on language, okay? So in the section C, always comment on the poetic techniques and their effects, only marks available for commenting on language, okay? So make sure you get as many marks as you can, and remember in section A and B, you get 4 marks in each of those for spelling, writing, and grammar. So make sure you have some proof checking time to go over any errors that you make. Everything counts. How's everyone doing? We have run through some key tips for the exam. Are you ready for some predicted poem anthology run through? I know I am. Bam. Okay. That was only the second gong of the session. Guys, I'm doing really well, I think. Sometimes I can get a bit gongiendo happy, but I'm loving this gong. I don't think all the people around me are loving it though. Oh well, sorry about it. Okay, so next, well, I'm glad you asked. There was a poll on Insta for what predicted paper you wanted to go over, and the Duchess came out on top. The Duchess had the most votes, so we're starting over by going over a predicted question for the Duchess, okay? And we're going to go over some of those structure points we talked about earlier on how to structure your answers to get the most out of it. So I'll just share my screen with you, and I will disappear for a second. I know you're probably heartbroken, but I will reappear at the end of the 3, 2, 1 countdown. You're welcome. And we'll run through some key stuff for the Duchess. So an example question of something that could come up that you could see tomorrow is, oh my God, also, I love the idea to name the gong. Get in your suggestions on what we should name the gong. Compare the poet's presentation of impacts and power on the individual and My Last Duchess in one different poem from the poetry cluster, Power and Conflict. So remember to compare from the cluster that you're in. So My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, very beautiful poem. Here it is. I'm not going to read through it, but I am going to go over some structuring points and how a good way to structure your essay would be. So firstly, we have our introductory sentence, and you're going to want to link the poems from the get-go. I'm glad someone shouted out about the poem London, because we're talking about it. So the introductory sentence, you want to talk about both those poems. So both My Last Duchess and London show the impact of power and how it corrupts. We call this a topic sentence. So the first sentence should outline what the rest of your introduction is going to say. So you want to mention both poems, and you want to mention the key theme or whatever that's mentioned in the question. Okay, so next we have you want to link it from the beginning. Okay, and once you've linked it from the beginning, you're going to want to link those 2 poems. So the Duke and My Last Duchess are concerned with his power and status. Essentially, he appears as a man who has murdered his wife in order to control her and excise the jealousy he feels towards her supposed flirtatious qualities and lack of gratitude. Then you're going to give some evidence, right? So although the reader doesn't become aware of the truth in the situation later in the text, his opening line presents his late wife as a kind of trophy who was pointed on the wall. Okay, so what you notice here is we're using some embedded quotations. So that's what's really going to help elevate your answers and help your paragraph sound a bit less robotic. So try and embed your quotations where you can, okay? Again, we want to give some more evidence. So if you're pushing for 7 to 9, you want to give more than one piece of evidence for every point that you make. So the voice chosen by Browning seems to be that of the sociopath who can't bear that it was not his presence only called the spot of joy into her cheek. Okay, and then you want to end your introduction. You want to summarize what your essay is going to discuss. So he is a man of status, a duke who believes his position will allow him to do as he wishes. Here, Browning shows the effect of power on the individual. It corrupts, and for the Duchess, leads to her death. Clearly, the poem reveals how power in the hands of the wrong person can lead to disaster. Okay. For those of you asking, the live stream is on for another 15 minutes. It's on until 6, so it's just a quick 30 minutes, a quick 30-minute booster. Oh, you guys are answering so quick already. You guys so good. Little gong for everybody. I like that. I'm liking Greg the Gong. I think that's a good name. Okay, so then you're going to want to think of your points. Okay, so Blake's London also explores. So we want to link it to the other poem. Remember, this is a comparative essay, so you need to compare both poems. So Blake's London also explores the effects of power on the individual, drawing attention to the experiences of the powerless in the capital, and suggests that society's vulnerable people are exploited by the larger power structures of the world they live in. And then Blake shows how the powerful entities own the city. It is chartered. So again, embed those quotes if you can. It's going to help boost you up in the mark scheme. And that social and economic power is concentrated in the hands of those institutions who should help rather than exploit people. So you can see we have a double explanation there. Here we have the explanation of vulnerable people being exploited, and then we have another one of economic power is concentrated in the hands of the institutions which should help rather than exploit people. So when you are appealing or where you are peddling your paragraphs, try and give as many different types of evaluation as you can. That's going to help you hit that analysis assessment objective. And again, here, the word chartered suggests that capital has been mapped, but it also implies control. So you can see there how you are taking one word and you're giving two explanations about it, okay? That's what the examiner is going to want to see to be giving you those higher marks, okay? So try and say more than one thing about a particular quote. Streets of London and even the river are owned and controlled by someone unnamed power. Blake is suggesting that ordinary people living in London do not have freedom of their own city, okay? So that takes us to the end of the first paragraph. So at the moment we are doing power and conflict, and if we have, yes, we'll quickly go over love and relationships for those of you asking. So structural and linguistical choices. So this is a good example of how to structure your paragraph. So make your point, you want it to be a topic sentence. So the structural and linguistical choices in both poems reflect the effects power can have. Then you've got some evidence. So the term Duchess suggests that power, but as we find, she has little control over her life. The narrator uses of my sounds possessive as if he owns her. So again, nice embedded quotation. Then we give an explanation of that. Then you give some further evidence, so use a different quote or something like that. The further evidence, again, is going to help you hit more of those assessment objectives. And then link, very important. By using a narrator who's shown as controlling and possibly insane, Browning invites you to think about how powerful people misuse their power. The Duke clearly thinks that his former wife has misbehaved. She is powerless and made a victim by his desire to control her. Okay, so just to summarize, remember how to structure those paragraphs. Always have a nice topic sentence, evidence, explanation, some more evidence, some more explanation, maybe even some more explanation. It's all great. How is everybody doing? Good. And don't worry, we're going to have the whole essay will come up on the screen towards the end, so you can, when you rewatch the video, you can pause the live stream and have a read of the whole thing. At the moment, just trying to give you a good indication on how to structure those paragraphs. But I'm sure you're all pros by now, and this is hopefully just a nice little anxiety reducing stream. Let me know. Okay, so we'll talk over the conclusion next. So we have time to go over love and conflict, love, because I know not everyone's doing power and conflict. If you want to, so feel free to go if you're not doing the other option of love and relationships. But if you are, stick around, it's going to be fun. Conclusion, conclusion, a good thing to do is to have a summary. So ultimately, those with power are shown to be corrupt. Power in the wrong hands has devastating consequences on the innocent. Give a nice explanation, and in that explanation, link both of those poets. Remember, comparative essay, you need to talk about both poems. And then have your conclusion. Again, just a nice, quick, single sentence summarizing the rest of it. So that is how I would structure the essay. So here is this is a top level answer. So 7 to 9 in full. So this is what we've just talked about. You will see the structures in there, it will be good. So I would maybe like pause the screen, take a cheeky screenshot, just as a nice little read over. I'll scroll down 2 so you can get to the end. So this is a good example of how to structure your answer and key things to look out for is, remember, talk about both poems, embed your quotations, try and give more than one piece of evidence, and try and explain like, if you're having a quotation, explain it more than one ways. So how else could it be interpreted? That's a good linker. The author could also have been trying to achieve this. However, perhaps it means this, or blah, 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 blah. So that's what you want to be doing. So it was the predicted question we're going to run through. Next, we're going to switch over to love and conflict and the Farmer's Bride. This won the Insta poll for the one we were going to go over. Any questions so far? Any questions? And we're switching to love and relationships now. So if you're doing power and conflict, actually stick around. It's going to be fun. There might even be another gong involved. You're welcome. So the Farmer's Bride, Charlotte Muse, again, lovely, beautiful poem. We haven't got ages left, so we'll just quickly talk over how to structure different parts. So in your introductory sentence, remember, you want to mention both of the poems, the ones that you're going to be comparing it to. And the question is, compare how the poets portray ideas about control in the Farmer's Bride and one different poem from the poetry cluster, love and relationships. So this is a good, control is a very common theme in this anthology. So this is a good one to go over. And you're very welcome, everyone who's joining and who has to leave because they're not doing love and relationships. Hope this is useful. But let's stick around if you want to go over some love and relationships. So we're all about control and the Father's Bride. So how are you going to structure your introduction? We will, when we get to the end of this, there might be a little gong. Introductory sentence. So you want your introduction, the Farmer's Bride, and Periphery's Lover both share features of the ballad form. So you're going to want to talk about both poems in your introduction. Summary of how they compare. They have examples of a dramatic monologue to think about the form of the poem and the structure, using first-person speakers who gradually reveal themselves to the reader. So nice summary of both poems. You're hitting those comparative assessment objectives right from the get-go. It's great. We learn more about both male speakers as each poem progresses, and readers may be troubled by what they learn, particularly as in both poems, the male speakers can be seen as trying to assert control over a female character. So again, you want to use that question word in your introduction. So control, okay? So next we're going to go over how to structure some paragraphs. Do we have any questions on the chat? Let me know. I do care about your grades. I'm here from before 10 to 6, so I hope this is useful for you guys. Let me know what else would be useful. This is the first time we're doing live streams, so as much feedback as we can get would be awesome, so we can make these as useful as possible. So again, how to structure your paragraphs. So again, we have our point. This has got to be a topic sentence. So it's got to summarize what you're going to be covering. In both poems, the female characters are the victims of a male speaker's need for control. This is a good topic sentence because A, it tells us exactly what this paragraph is going to be about. 2, it mentions that word control, which is the key question word. We want to be answering the question. And then we're going to do a nice peel structure, okay? So evidence and explanation. So the farmer's first wife is referred to as a maid. Again, we want to embed those quotations. It pushes you up the mark scheme. And then we want to explain what that quote means and even offer some more evidence, okay? So if you're pushing for 7 to 9, we want to talk about wider symbolism. So Mew appears to be condemning a society which allows such marriages to take place, particularly in rural communities, okay? So that's just like an extra little like push up if you want to be heading up those grades. Now, we want to give a further point, so you want to develop your points. That's what's going to help you get you those 7 to 9 marks. You want to give another point, some more evidence and some more explanation. So here we've got the imagery of her as a mouse and a little frightened face suggests her vulnerability, while the simile of her flying like a hare conveying her terror and natural impulse to escape her husband. So again, we've got lots of pieces of evidence for a single point. That's what the examiner wants to see. Really, really strong argument. Yes, I'll try and go over some tips for analyzing quotes at the end. what I want to make sure we do is, because we only got 5 minutes left, I'm just going to scroll down so you can see the answer in full, maybe like take a quick little screenshot or watch the video back, as this will just go through really nicely a comparison of those two poems. And then we scroll down a little bit more. That's a long answer. Okay. So I'll just go over the conclusion because it's important to conclude your essay. Although if you're really rushed, I'd say like a little tip, if you have like 5 minutes left and you're really rushed to do another paragraph, I would write another paragraph of analysis rather than a conclusion, because your conclusion can just be a sentence. If you're rushing, you'll get more marks for analysis. So if you're really strapped for time, I would write another. Another paragraph of analysis. Okay, so again, these are really good paragraphs because they highlight how important it is to compare. Both poets use the form of their poems to convey the speaker's thoughts and feelings. I'll let you guys read it. You're probably sick of my voice, so you don't want to hear me read out a paragraph. But again, key things I would take out, look at that nice embedded quotation. We're giving more than one piece of evidence at every point, and we're analyzing the evidence in more than one way. So we're just doing poems in this live stream. Books was there are so many books for the AQA spec, it was hard to just try and cover all of them in 30 minutes, whereas we thought a good compromise was to do the two poems. So in terms of some tips for analyzing, I would say like just be creative, be interpretive, just learn, like with analysis, you can't be wrong. If you can argue something, you can't be wrong. Key things I would think about, they're really like common things to remember. So like adjective choice, what does that adjective mean? So like worship, think about like the context where you normally use worship. It's when something's like I don't know, you don't just work, it's better than using a word like seen, right? So what does the adjective or the verb that's used imply? That's what analysis is really about, because the author could have used any word, okay? So I would, yeah, that would be a good thing to look out for analysis. I would say that try and look at the type of nouns used. Are they possessive nouns? So like mine, that comes up quite a lot. We'll look at the word choices. Are they all really short? Are they monosyllabic? How does the poem make you feel when you read it? And like, why does it make you feel like that? If it makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, what is it? The language. Think about how it makes you feel would be my advice. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of the live stream, which is great because I'm stuck in this really tiny little room. And I need to get a fan or something in here. All I've got is a gong. Also, I saw a shout out for the name of Gongy McGongface. Absolute winner. That is the name. I love it. So I would say key points to remember for your exam tomorrow. When you're analyzing, just try and remember to use evidence and use more than one piece of evidence per point. That's going to really help bump you up. In terms of, I can see loads of you asking for, like with predictions, it's hard to know what's going to come up, but it's like, it could be, so it's good to learn all of your quotes. I'd say for inspector calls, that's been a popular one. Eric, like, how far is Eric presented by Priestley as an admirable character? That could be something that could come up, that I think could be there, who knows? Another thing that could come up for inspector calls would be something I haven't seen come up in a while, would be how Mr. Burling is presented by Priestley as a powerful character in inspector calls. That could be something. So those are two things I would think about. So that unfortunately brings us to the end of the live stream. I am but one Jono, so I hope I covered enough for everyone. But thank you for joining in, and remember, you need to answer one question from section A, one from section B, and both questions in section C. That last question, answer both questions. One of them is only 8 marks, so it'll only be 10 minutes. Keep an eye on your timings. Remember to spend roughly about 45 minutes on each section because you don't want to be running out of time at the end. And thanks everyone for tuning in. As ever, if you stick around and you head over to Seneca, there's a free trial for our smart learning mode, which uses like neuroscience and forgetting curves and all kinds of stuff to make learning more efficient. So go over and try that out. Any feedback on this would be great. Let me know. Let me know what would be useful for you guys. And remember those 4 marks for spelling and grammar. They come up. They're only in section A and section B though, so those are the most important to proof check. Good luck for tomorrow, everybody. It's nearly the weekend and it's nearly half term, so you can have a little bit of a break. Remember to keep yourself healthy and happy during exam season. So see your mates, hang out with your friends, keep active, go for a nice walk, eat healthy, keep hydrated. It'll be over soon. So best of luck, everybody. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you tomorrow. We've got live streams for GCSE Business, where Stephen will be making a comeback. We'll also... Oh, so loud.